Where are you calling from?
I'm actually calling from Florida. I live in Florida.
Oh, okay. I'm in California right now.
So what are you doing? Or is it professional reasons why you're...
It's both. My wife is in a play, a new play out here, and I'm visiting her, but the play needed a song as part of the play, and I wrote the song, so it's both kind of a little business and pleasure.
Yeah. Well, you've been doing a lot of stage work lately, haven't you?
Yeah, well, it's always been my first love. I started out as a theater composer, and right now I'm working on 2 musicals with 2 different groups of people, and just had a revival about 4 or 5 months ago of an old musical of mine that ran 6 months just recently in New York, and so I've always gone back and forth, and now since my film work is few and far between, I'm doing mostly theater, and I live in New York now.
Well, I hear actors always talk about, their love of the stage, and they find the difference between stage and film. There's a purity on the stage that isn't always there on film. Is there a similar difference for you?
Well, in a way, that's true. I don't know if I agree with that. For me, there's a lot of similarity in the techniques I use. Writing music for the stage, you're writing about character and plot, and you're writing dramatic music to help express a dramatic situation. And you're doing the same thing in films, except the difference is that in movies, you're writing background music. It's someone else's creative vision overall, and you're writing music like costume designer designs costumes and set designer designs sets. Composer is kind of designing music to help enhance the director-writer's vision. In the stage, however, music is foreground music, and it's part of the dialogue, so to speak. And it's a project that I've picked with my collaborators to do. So we're kind of the foreground of the project, and other people are helping us.
Well, I've been so excited to talk to you because, so many of the films that you've worked on are personal favorites of mine, and have really shaped my love of movies. I mean, they're movies that I treasure so much. And you talk about being in the service of a cinematic story and a director specifically, and you've worked with some of the best. Do you find that the best directors challenge you?
Yeah, well, they do in the sense that, I'll give you go right to an example. Francis Coppola, who, interestingly enough, has really started out on the stage too. He wrote musicals when he was in college, and he's directed operas and things. But he like many good directors, asks the music to do something that isn't on the screen. In other words, when we were spotting the conversation, instead of asking for an electronic score because Harry Cole was an electronic eavesdropper, or asking for a thriller score, said he wanted me to not echo what was directly in the music, but try to show something in the music that wasn't on the screen, like what's going on inside this very private person. So he gave me some exercises to write some little piano pieces, not even thinking about specific scenes in the movie. He gave me some other titles to write piano pieces about, and I did that. One of the pieces was became the theme for the conversation. So the difference really is that less interesting directors tend to, like when you're doing television, the music is mostly amplifying what's already on the screen. If it's a scary scene, you write scary music. If it's a love scene, you write love music. Whereas the more creative use of music in movies is to kind of make another level with the music. So it's really adding something emotionally to the mix rather than aping something that's already there.
Well, and I think your music for the conversation is so beautiful and brilliantly applied to the movie, because I think that movie is one of the great character studies, and it is very internal, and your music kind of reflects that. But there's also a jazz element to it, because obviously he's a musician himself, and that
was part of the mix.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of composers talk about their jazz background being very helpful to them when they compose films. Is it similar to you? You've had a jazz background, correct?
Yeah, I really started out in theater music and pop music, which in the days of my childhood was theater music was pop music. You know, the songs in the new musicals would be the ones that were playing on the radio. But my father was a musician, a pop musician, had a dance band that played at parties and weddings and things, and taught pop piano during the day. So I was constantly listening to that music in my early childhood. And my first piano lessons were with him. Before I studied classical music, I was learning how to play pop music. And I had a jazz group in high school. I had another jazz group in college. I played on the college fraternity circuit, sorority circuit. And so jazz has always been kind of a first language of mine, a first musical language. So that comes very, very easily to me. And interestingly enough, one of the two musicals I'm working right now has kind of a jazz-inflected score.
Mm. But there's also, when you write a score that is as indelible and surprising and different as the conversation, do you find that you have to fight against typecasting in a way? I mean, where people hire you because they want a similar sound?
Yeah, there's been a few people, several pictures that I've gotten because of a director's specific love for that score. And several times they've asked for a score similar to that, which is really tough because, you know, it's hard to imitate yourself and make it as fresh as the first time around. So I encourage them to help me find what I can do differently that has the same mood. You don't want to write an obvious ripoff of yourself. Mm-hmm. Actually, Zodiac, I was hired for because Fincher tracked a few of the scenes with cues from the conversation. And when I went to talk to him about the score, I said, well, yes, some of the scenes would be interesting to score with solo piano, but because the conversation was a very intimate, small-scale picture, and your picture is a very large-screen, large-scale picture, you're going to need more than just a piano. We should think about an orchestra. But it was that same kind of mood. It was the same kind of dark, brooding, interesting score that was trying to get inside of the characters and the situation of a movie without doing something that was obvious.
See, when I saw Zodiac, I thought you were so absolutely perfect for it, because Zodiac, in a lot of ways, reminded me of a modern day All the President's Men. I mean,
similar to that too.
Yeah. Fincher is a really exacting director, I've heard.
Oh yeah, incredibly so.
So what were his? I mean, was he very specific about the music that he wanted? I mean, does he have a musical language?
He didn't really, which was interesting. He liked the conversation, so that was a starting point. I knew in what general world or general pond to go fishing in. I made some suggestions to him with specific music that he could try against the picture, other people's music, most particularly Charles Ives' Unanswered Question. And he put that up against a few scenes and said, oh, that's terrific. Why don't you use that as a model too? So that helped a great deal. And a method of working was that he wanted demos of every cue in the picture. He wanted the entire score demoed as I wrote it on synthesizers. Very good demos. He almost was as critical about the demos as he was eventually about the score. But I worked with a fellow I work with and when I'm doing imitative synthesis, and we demoed every cue in the picture, and would send them as they were done. We would send MP3s to Fincher, who was on the West Coast, and we were working on the East Coast, and he would make notes and give us his criticisms, and we would work on a cue until it was perfect, and then we would go on to the next one. So by the time we came to go into the studio with an orchestra, the whole score had been approved. But it was very meticulous, it was really scoring the picture before you actually went in and recorded it.
Then there's also, I mentioned All the President's Men just a bit ago, and that's a movie. I mean, Pakula was absolutely one of my favorite filmmakers, but that's a movie that it's hard to imagine spotting the music for that movie where it would not be intrusive.
No, as a matter of fact, the first time I saw the movie, when I finished, I said, God, what a terrific movie, but what do you need music for, and where is it going to go? I mean, it's so documentary. Why do you feel you need a score? He said, well, I want to remind people every so often that for all of the documentary quality of the movie, it's basically a story about two guys whose hearts are beating faster and faster, and that remark kind of gave me the leg into the foot in the door of the movie.
And it's so kind of subtle. I mean, it's very kind of insidious when it comes in and out. You don't really. I mean, walking out of that movie, you don't really think that it even has a score. I mean, your work is.
I know it. As a matter of fact, the score was disqualified by the Music Branch Academy for Oscar nomination because they didn't feel there was enough music in it.
Huh. Now, did you write a lot more music than actually was ended up using?
Wrote about twice as much.
Oh,
but we knew that we were writing more than we were going to use. But we wanted to try to score every scene that was possible, and then take it out as it wasn't needed.
Well, there's two other scores from your 70s period that I so absolutely adore, and they're so original. And that's, I'm sure you've talked about this one a lot, which is Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
That has such an urban grittiness and kind of that with the horn, such a sense of propulsion. Did that sound come to you right away whenever you first watched the movie, or did that evolve?
It evolved, and it was maybe one of the most difficult problems I ever had to solve. I knew I wanted dissonant jazz, but to get a dissonant jazz that was coherent and yet original in some way. That didn't sound like watered down Mahler, Schifrin, or Quincy Jones. It took about a month to find. I was literally almost ready to give up when I finally found the compositional technique that allowed me to get into that particular sound. And once I cracked it, then the rest of the score only took a couple of weeks to write. But that initial thing of finding the basic theme and the basic sound for the movie took quite a while.
Well, the other great 70s score that I adore of yours is Straight Time.
Yeah.
And that's such a beautiful, unique sound, your score. And this is the thing about 70s film music that you were involved in that I love so much, is it doesn't seem to be derivative of any other scores that I'd heard. And neither did the movies, too, actually.
Yeah, I guess that was when, a lot of the independent filmmakers, the San Francisco guys and the Rafelsons and the period when directors were breaking away from Hollywood and doing their own thing. And I guess some of the scores reflect that to the best movies. Like Francis saying, I want you to forget about everything you've been doing up to now in Los Angeles, and I want you to take a whole different approach to this picture. And so he devised an exercise that got me to think about it differently, just the way he was thinking about making movies differently.
Well, the 70s were my favorite period of time for movies. And I look at how movies have changed since the 70s, and I know that you see it as well, but how has the dynamic of film scoring and how film score is used in movies, how has that changed over the recent years?
Well, as you know, in the golden age, the age of Tiomkin and Korngold and Max Steiner and Lionel Newman, Alfred Newman, Lionel's his brother, who was head of MGM for a while. It was pretty much one kind of movie score, the symphonic score. Mm-hmm. And I guess 90% of the movies had that, at least the dramatic ones. But it was I can't think of a single movie except the silent movies that had a single piano, but because they hadn't figured out, I guess, a way to put an orchestra on it. But then it evolved up from there, and then for a long time it was just those wonderful symphonic scores. And then in the 50s, 60s, 70s, I guess as jazz became more prominent and other kinds of music became more prominent, it found its way into film scores. Come to think of it, I guess as music has evolved, non-classic music, like folk music, rock music, movies, seeing that they're about contemporary subjects, have used contemporary music, contemporary pop music, and even classical music to score their pictures. I guess it's a natural, cross-discipline phenomena. And now, today, music is such a multi-niche market. There's music of every kind for every taste, world music and rap music and minimalism, and you can name 20 schools of music, and all of that becomes possible ways to score a movie. So I guess it's just a much larger palette now. And with synthesizers, it became an even larger palette because you not only had acoustic instruments to work with, but all kinds of sounds that had never been used before.
Yeah. Well, but I feel like a lot of movies today utilize film score as almost an extension of the sound effects. Whereas what I miss a lot of times is the great sense of melody that people like you had and have.
Yeah, well, you get it with Spielberg and Johnny Williams, which
sure.
is, thank God, he's kept he revived the old tradition. John Williams became the neo Korngold, and those scores are just wonderful. But they brought back that whole tradition, kind of neoclassical film scoring.
Mm-hmm. There's one other score that I wanted to ask you about, actually, specifically, and that was Return to Oz.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites, and I was sorry that the movie never did very well, because I would have liked that score to get more widely known. I thought it would be the score that would get me untypecast from the conversation, because it was so different.
Yeah,
I know. It was my big, Johnny Williams orchestral score. And unfortunately, the movie really bombed. And also it was directed by Walter Murch, who I did the conversation with, who is, one of my closest friends and most admired collaborators. Just a wonderful person. I just love that score, frankly.
Yeah, I do too.
In a way, my best work. Talking about Walter Murch, I forgot about one thing on your previous question. You talked about scores being an extension of sound effects.
Uh-huh.
The Conversation is a great example of kind of the ideal of the merger of sound effects and music, because Walter, who's such a genius and who's doing both the editing of the movie and the mixing of the music, did a lot of experimenting as we were creating the score alongside the editing of the music. The score was being created as the movie was being edited, because being a piano score, I could just make a tape of a cue and send it up there to San Francisco, and they could play around with it. And a lot of the things I get credit for on that score are really part of due to Walter. He would shift around cues from one place to another, and they'd work better in the second place than the place I had written it for. And there are other places in the movie where you can't tell if it's score or sound effects. And that's really the ideal. That it's all one big sound tapestry, and some of it is music and some of it is sound effects, but instead of fighting each other, they're beautifully integrated.
Yeah, they complement each other very well. And it occurs to me that you did Return to Oz, which was such a brave and ambitious movie to undertake, obviously, because it's a ascendant of the Wizard of Oz. But right before that, you did 2010 for Peter Hyams, which is also an incredibly brilliant movie of the same sort.
Yeah.
And Peter Hyams, he's been on our show several times. I'm very fond of him, and you've done a couple of movies with him. Yeah,
I did one recently. I forget the name of it. It wasn't a very popular movie.
Beyond a Reasonable Doubt.
Yeah, Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. And I think those are the only two times I've worked with him.
Yeah.
And he likes to, he's his own cameraman. And if he could write music, I'm sure he'd write his own scores. He likes to do it. He'd even sell popcorn in the lobby if he had time.
He'll do it all. Is there a genre that you've longed to work in that you haven't been able to, or not?
Well, I wish I could have done more jazz scores, because I like that language, and I wish I could have done more symphonic scores. you don't like to be typecast when you feel you can do almost anything.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the nice things about doing film scores, which I haven't, something that you're not able to get when you're writing so much for the theater, is that so many pictures have asked me to write music in styles that I never would have thought of writing anything in. 12-tone music, rock music, ethnic music, and it has just encouraged me to increase my vocabulary, and a lot of that amplified vocabulary has been of use to me in projects for the theater. So there's a nice cross-fertilization there.
Yeah. This is the last question that we ask everyone that has been a guest on the series, and it's usually the most difficult question for all of us. If you were to choose, a few scores outside of your own that you think are essential, which titles would they be?
It's hard to name specific ones because there are so many, but generally the scores that I've liked the most are John Williams, Lalo Schifrin. I like a lot of the old scores, the old classic scores, but of the contemporary peers, I like Tommy Newman's work a lot, mainly because he does something that I feel and other people feel that I do, which is create scores that are so different for different pictures. He never copies himself. He never you never feel he's kind of grinding out, imitating genre. It seems like every picture he becomes a different composer, and I just find that very, very, very fresh. But on any given day, I could name 5 pictures that are my favorites, and then another day they'd be 5 different ones. So
yeah.
I'm sorry to be so vague.
That was perfect.
I love Jaws. I love Star Wars. I love the score that Tommy did for the Green Mile. Was that prison picture?
Yes.
And
let me tell you, the work that you've done means a lot to me, and I
well, that's great to know. Thank you so much.